Hello children, hope you all are doing fine. So today in this module we are going to read the chapter The Last Lesson by a famous French novelist and short story writer Alphonse Daudet. Now children, I would like to introduce this chapter first. This chapter The Last Lesson is set in Alsace, a region between France and Germany that has been fiercely contested between the two nations for years. This was especially true during the Franco-Prussian War that took place in 1870, which was a major victory for Prussia under Bismarck. For your information, I also must tell you that Otto von Bismarck, he served as Prime Minister of Prussia from 1862 to 73 and then again from 1873 to 1890. He was the founder and first Chancellor of the German Empire. So children, as a part of the treaty that ended the war, Germany received Alsace and Lorraine, which had been under French control. So, by an order from Berlin, German language was imposed on the French-speaking people of Alsace and Lorraine. The story highlights the dismay and distress of M. Hamel and his students and the villagers caused by that order from Berlin. Now students, before moving to the explanation part, I must tell you the motive of the chapter, which will help you in understanding the story. Now, the first point in the story that has been raised is linguistic chauvinism. Now, children, linguistic chauvinism is considering your language superior to others, taking too much pride in your own language. So, linguistic chauvinism of the conquerors trying to crush their victims in every possible manner, whether materially, spiritually, mentally and emotionally. That is the main motive of this story. The story emphasizes the deep link that exists between language and cultural identity. Here, the writer also projects the pain that is inflicted upon the people of France who were forced to learn German, thus making them aliens in their own motherland. There is a sub-theme in this chapter that highlights the attitude of the students and teachers to learning and teaching. Now, explanation part. When you read the first paragraph, it says, I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of a scolding, especially because M. Hamel had said that he would question us on participles, and I did not know the first word about them. For a moment I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field, back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles. But I had the strength to resist and hurried off to school. Now let's check the explanation. Before going for explanation, we must practice vocabulary. Now children, you can see the words which are in red. The meaning of those words are given here. Like dread, it means fear, afraid. Sawmill, a factory in which logs are sawn into planks or boards by machine. Prussian, relating to the former kingdom of Prussia, which doesn't exist now. Tempting, inviting or appealing. Resist, repel or stay away. Now let's check the explanation of this. The narrator is a young schoolboy named Franz. He was scared that morning as he was not prepared for the lesson on the topic of participles that his teacher M. Hamel had announced the previous day. He thought to miss his classes and stay outside enjoying the weather, which was so warm and sunny. He could hear the birds chirping and Prussian soldiers at the back of the sawmill. There was an open ground. The Prussian soldiers were training or marching there. The scene outside the school or classroom was more attractive than the school, but Franz controlled his temptation and decided to attend the school instead of missing his classes. The next paragraph, children, it says, when I passed the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. the lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer, and I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? Then, as I hurried by as fast as I could go, the blacksmith walked up, who was there with his apprentice, reading the bulletin, called after me. Don't go so fast, Bub. You'll get to your school in plenty of time. I thought he was making fun of me and reached M. Hamel's little garden all out of breath. Usually, when school began, there was a great bustle which could be heard out in the street. The opening and closing of desks, lessons repeated in unison very loud with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. Now, first we'll check the glossary, the word meanings. Now, children, here you can see the word town hall. It means a building or space used for administration of local government. Blacksmith, a person who makes and repairs things in iron by hand. Apprentice means a trainee or an assistant. Bub, children, it's a slang term used for a teenager or for a boy. Bustle, excited activity and movement or commotion. Unison, acting or speaking together or at the same time. Rapping, strike, especially on a hard surface, with a series of rapid audible blows, specially in order to attract attention. Now let's check explanation of these paragraphs. Now it says that as Franz walked past the town hall, he noticed a huge crowd at the notice board. The war with Prussia had begun 2.5 years ago, and since then all the bad news had been communicated to the people of Alsace and Lorraine by that bulletin board only. Though Franz kept walking, but was also curious what news could have been put up at the bulletin board. As he walked hurriedly towards the school, the blacksmith, who had read the news and had come along with his assistant, called out to Franz from behind and told that he need not go in such a hurry, as there was plenty of time for him to reach school. Franz thought that the blacksmith was making fun of him for being late to school. When Franz reached the garden outside the school, he was out of breath as he had walked very fast. Franz describes the usual commotion at the school in the mornings. That was opening and closing of desks, children repeating their lessons, and teachers striking the tables with the rulers could be heard. The next paragraph says, but now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But, of course, that day everything had to be as quiet as Sunday morning. Through the window I saw my classmates already in their places, and M. Hamel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. But nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you." I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. Let's check word meanings first. Counted on, depended upon. Commotion, a state of confused and noisy disturbance. Blushed, to become red in the face, especially from shame, modesty, or confusion. Fright, a sudden, intense feeling of fear. Now let's check explanation part. So children, you see here that when Franz finally reached the class, to his dismay there was an unusual silence spread in the school that day, and it seemed that the school was closed as it used to be on a Sunday morning. Franz had planned to take cover under the disturbance and enter the class without being noticed, but that did not seem possible. He saw his classmates already settled at their places, and his teacher walking in the classroom with his ruler under his arm. Eventually, Franz opens the door as there was no other way out, and he enters the class. To his surprise, M. Hamel addressed him kindly and asked to settle down as they were about to start their lesson. Franz scurried to his seat. After some time, when he overcame his fright and became comfortable, he noticed that his teacher had worn his best clothes that day, which he normally wore on special occasions like inspection and prize distribution days. Franz wondered if that was a normal day. Now let's check the next paragraph, children. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty, the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. Old Hauser, with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. Everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer thumbed at the edges, and he held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. While I was wondering about it all, M. Hamel mounted his chair, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." What a thunderclap these words were to me. Oh, the wretches! That was what they had put up at the town hall. Let's check the word meanings. Solemn means serious, sincere, or impressive. Hauser, it's a German surname. Primer, it is basic reader of any language. Thumbed, torn, damaged, or worn out. Mounted, to go up or onto something. Like M. Hamel, he sat on his chair, so he mounted on his chair. Thunderclap, used in comparison to refer to something startling or unexpected. Wretches, here wretches means unfortunate happening. Let's check the explanation. Though the atmosphere in the school was unusual and serious, but the most unusual thing to notice was the presence of old villagers at the back benches. Franz was confused and could not understand what was happening that day. Just then, M. Hamel told them that it was their last lesson in French, as there was an order from Berlin not to teach French language in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, and the German language should be taught instead. The German teacher was to arrive the next day, and as this was their last lesson, M. Hamel wanted all the students to be very attentive. Franz was shocked to know that he could not learn French any longer, and now he knew the news that had been put up at the bulletin board of the town hall was this only. So children, the first half of the chapter is done here. Now I'm giving you some questions for practice so that you can understand how much you understood this chapter. Okay, and in case of any question, any problem, you can drop me a message there on your group and I'll be answering your queries there. So these questions you have to write in your notebook. Check the questions here, children. What was Franz expected to be prepared with for school that day? Question number 2 says, what did Franz notice on the way to his school? What was so unusual about the school that day? Third question. Fourth question says, who all were sitting on the back benches of the class? Fifth is, what sounded like a thunderclap to Franz? The last question is, what had been put up on the bulletin board that day? Now children, take care of yourself. In the second module, I'll be coming up with the second half of this chapter. Thank you. Keep yourself safe and sanitized.